In a world where children often go unnoticed, where broken things stay broken, and where the absence of a parent can feel like an insurmountable mountain, sometimes all it takes is one person willing to listen. Sometimes, the most powerful words aren't spoken by those in authority, but by a small voice carrying the weight of the world, asking for nothing more than a chance. This is the story of how one question changed two lives forever, proving that family isn't always about blood, and that fathers can emerge from the most unexpected places. The morning sun cast long shadows across Riverside Avenue as 9-year-old Maya Johnson pushed her battered red bicycle down the cracked sidewalk. The front wheel wobbled with each step, making a rhythmic clicking sound that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Her school backpack bounced against her thin frame, and her sneakers, 2 sizes too big and held together with duct tape, scraped against the concrete with each determined stride. Maya had been walking her bicycle to school for 3 weeks now. The chain had snapped during her ride home from Lincoln Elementary, leaving her stranded 6 blocks from her apartment. She had tried to fix it herself, watching YouTube videos on the old tablet her mother sometimes let her use when the internet was working. But her small fingers couldn't manage the tools she didn't have, and the chain seemed to mock her efforts by falling off again and again. Each morning, she would wheel the bicycle to the bus stop, hoping that maybe today someone would notice and offer to help. But the other kids barely glanced her way, and the adults were always buried in their phones or rushing to catch their own rides to work. Maya had learned early in life that if something needed doing, she would have to figure it out herself. The bicycle had been a gift from her mother 2 birthdays ago, bought secondhand from a garage sale across town. It wasn't much to look at even then, with its chipped paint and mismatched handlebars, but to Maya, it had been everything. It meant freedom from walking everywhere. It meant being able to ride to the library on weekends. It meant feeling, for just a few precious moments each day, like any other kid in the neighborhood. Her mother, Carmen, worked 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment and put food on the table. During the day, she cleaned offices downtown, and 3 nights a week, she stocked shelves at the grocery store. Carmen would leave before Maya woke up and return long after bedtime, leaving carefully written notes with instructions for heating up dinner and reminders to lock the door. Maya had become an expert at reading her mother's hurried handwriting and following the detailed lists that kept their small world functioning. There had never been a father in the picture. Maya had stopped asking about him when she was 7, after seeing the way her mother's face would crumple just slightly before she changed the subject. She understood, even at her young age, that some questions caused more pain than they were worth. But that didn't stop her from wondering, especially when she watched other kids being picked up from school by their dads, or when she needed help with something her mother wasn't there to fix. As Maya approached the corner of Riverside and 3rd Street, she noticed the small auto repair shop that sat squeezed between a laundromat and a corner store. Eddie's Auto Repair had been there for as long as she could remember, but she had never paid much attention to it. Cars were always parked outside with their hoods up, and she could usually hear the sound of tools clanking and men talking over the noise of engines and air compressors. This morning, though, something was different. A tall black man with graying temples stood outside the shop, wiping his hands on a red rag. He wore blue coveralls with Eddie embroidered on the chest pocket, and his work boots were scuffed from years of honest labor. He moved with the deliberate confidence of someone who understood machines, who could diagnose problems with just the sound of an engine or the feel of a brake pedal. Eddie Martinez had owned the shop for 15 years, building it from nothing into a business that served the neighborhood with fairness and integrity. He was known for his honest estimates, his willingness to explain problems in plain English, and his habit of letting struggling customers pay in installments. More than once, he had fixed a car for free when he knew the owner was facing hard times, though he never advertised these acts of kindness. Maya slowed her pace as she approached the shop, her eyes fixed on Eddie as he organized tools on a portable cart. She had passed this way dozens of times, but something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was the gentle way he handled each tool, or the patient expression on his weathered face. Maybe it was simply that her desperation had reached a tipping point, and she was finally ready to take the risk of asking for help. Eddie noticed the small figure approaching with the broken bicycle and felt something tug at his chest. He had seen her before, always alone, always pushing that same red bike. As a father of 3 grown children who now lived in different cities, he recognized the particular determination of a child trying to solve an adult-sized problem. His own daughter had been about the same age when she had first attempted to change the oil in her toy car, convinced she could figure it out if she just watched him closely enough. Maya stopped about 10 feet from where Eddie stood, her hands gripping the handlebars of her bicycle tighter than necessary. She could feel her heart beating fast, the way it did when she had to give a presentation at school or when her mother asked her to call the landlord about the broken heater. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself of what her mother always said. The worst thing someone can say is no, and you'll still be exactly where you started. "Excuse me, sir," Maya began, her voice smaller than she intended. Eddie looked up from his tools, giving her his full attention in a way that made her feel both nervous and hopeful. "I don't have a father," she continued, the words tumbling out before she could lose her nerve. "Could you help me repair my bicycle?" The simplicity of her request hit Eddie like a physical blow. Here was a child who had identified exactly what she needed and had found the courage to ask for it. She hadn't made excuses or created an elaborate story. She had simply stated her situation and made her request with a dignity that would have impressed adults twice her age. Eddie set down the wrench he had been holding and walked closer to Maya, being careful not to move too quickly or tower over her small frame. He had learned from years of dealing with nervous customers that sometimes the approach mattered as much as the solution. "What's your name, young lady?" he asked, his voice warm and gentle. "Maya," she replied, relaxing slightly at his tone. "Maya Johnson. Well, Maya Johnson, I'm Eddie Martinez, and I think we can definitely take a look at your bicycle. Can you tell me what's wrong with it?" Maya's face lit up with relief and excitement. Someone was listening. Someone was willing to help. She began explaining about the broken chain, how it had happened, and all the ways she had tried to fix it herself. Eddie listened carefully, nodding at appropriate moments and asking questions that showed he was taking her seriously. As Maya spoke, Eddie found himself impressed by her resourcefulness and determination. She had clearly put considerable thought and effort into trying to solve the problem herself. She described watching repair videos, attempting to use a butter knife as a makeshift tool, and even trying to tie the chain back together with string. Each failed attempt had taught her something new about how bicycles worked, even if she hadn't been able to fix the underlying problem. "You know what, Maya?" Eddie said when she finished her explanation. "You've done some really smart thinking about this problem. The chain is definitely something we can fix, and I think you're going to be surprised by how much you already understand about bicycles." He gestured toward the open bay of his auto shop, where several cars in various states of repair were waiting for attention. "I've got some time right now if you'd like to bring your bike over here. We can take a look at it together, and I can show you how to fix it properly so you'll know what to do if it happens again." Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. Not only was this kind man willing to help her, but he wanted to teach her how to do it herself. She had expected, at best, for someone to fix her bicycle while she waited. The idea that she could learn to make repairs herself had never occurred to her. "Really?" she asked, her eyes wide with excitement. "You would teach me?" "Absolutely," Eddie replied with a smile. "My own kids learn to work on things by watching and helping. There's no reason you can't learn too. Besides, it's always better to understand how something works rather than just having it fixed for you." Maya carefully wheeled her bicycle into the auto shop, marveling at all the tools and equipment surrounding her. The smell of motor oil and metal was strong but not unpleasant, and the organized chaos of the workspace felt alive with possibility. She had never been inside a repair shop before, and everything seemed both foreign and fascinating. Eddie cleared a space at one of the workbenches and helped Maya lift her bicycle onto a stand that held it at a comfortable working height. He then began gathering the tools they would need, explaining each one as he selected it, and describing what it would be used for. Maya listened intently, asking questions about things she didn't understand, and making connections between what she was learning and what she had observed in her failed repair attempts. "The first thing we always do," Eddie explained, "is really look at the problem. Sometimes what seems broken is actually just out of place, and Sometimes what looks like a small problem is actually part of a bigger issue. So let's examine your chain and see exactly what's going on. Together, they crouched down next to the bicycle and studied the broken chain. Eddie showed Maya how to identify the specific link that had failed and explained why chains break in that particular way. He pointed out signs of wear that indicated the chain had been under stress for some time before finally snapping, and he helped her understand that the problem hadn't happened suddenly, but had been developing gradually. This is exactly the kind of thing you can prevent in the future, he told her, if you know what to look for. Chains need to be kept clean and lubricated, and they need to be replaced before they get too worn out. It's like taking care of anything else that's important to you. As they worked together to remove the broken chain, Eddie found himself thinking about his own children and how much he had learned from teaching them to solve problems with their hands. There was something special about the moment when a child first understood that broken things could be fixed, that complex problems could be broken down into manageable steps, and that the right tools and knowledge could overcome almost any obstacle. Maya proved to be an eager and capable student. Her small fingers were actually better suited than Eddie's for some of the more delicate work, and her attention to detail impressed him. She asked thoughtful questions about why things were designed the way they were, and she made careful mental notes about each step of the process so she could remember it later. When they had successfully removed the old chain and begun installing a new one, Maya felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything she had experienced before. She was actually fixing her bicycle. She was learning skills that would serve her for years to come. And, most importantly, she was doing it with the help of someone who believed in her ability to understand and succeed. Maya, Eddie said as they worked together to adjust the tension on the new chain. Can I ask you something? Sure, Maya replied, not looking up from the careful work of threading the chain through the derailleur. What made you decide to ask me for help today? I mean, you've been walking past here for weeks with that broken bicycle. What was different about this morning? Maya considered the question seriously. I guess I finally got tired of trying to do everything by myself, she said. My mom always says that asking for help isn't the same as giving up, but sometimes it feels like it is. This morning, though, I realized that not asking for help was actually keeping me from getting where I needed to go. Eddie nodded, recognizing wisdom that many adults never fully grasp. That's a very mature way to think about it. And you know what? Asking for help the way you did took real courage. A lot of people would have been too proud or too scared to be that honest about what they needed. As they continued working, Eddie found himself sharing stories about his own children and the various projects they had worked on together over the years. He told Maya about the time his youngest daughter had insisted on rebuilding the engine of a lawnmower, even though she was only 12 years old. He described the go-kart his son had designed and built from scratch, and the treehouse his oldest daughter had constructed with mathematical precision that impressed her engineering teachers. Maya listened to these stories with fascination, trying to imagine what it would be like to have a father who taught you to build things and encouraged your curiosity about how the world worked. She found herself wondering what her own father might have been like, and whether he would have been patient and encouraging like Eddie seemed to be with his children. The chain installation was nearly complete when Maya's phone buzzed with a text message. She checked it quickly and saw a note from her mother asking if she had made it to school safely. Maya realized with a start that she was going to be late, but for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel anxious about it. She had been learning something important, and she felt confident that her teacher would understand when she explained the situation. I need to get to school soon, Maya said reluctantly, not wanting this experience to end. Of course, Eddie replied. Let's finish up this last adjustment, and then your bicycle will be good as new. Better than new, actually, because now you know how to take care of it properly. They completed the final steps of the repair, and Eddie showed Maya how to test the chain tension and make sure everything was working smoothly. When Maya climbed onto the bicycle and took her first pedal strokes in 3 weeks, her face broke into a grin so wide that Eddie couldn't help but smile in response. It works perfectly, Maya exclaimed, riding in a small circle around the auto shop. I can't believe we actually fixed it. You fixed it, Eddie corrected gently. I just showed you how. There's a difference, and it's an important one. This is your accomplishment, Maya. As Maya prepared to ride to school, Eddie wrote his phone number on the back of one of his business cards. "Listen," he said, handing her the card. "If you ever have any other problems with your bicycle, or if you want to learn more about how things work, you give me a call. And Maya, don't hesitate to ask for help when you need it. That's not something you should ever feel bad about." Maya took the card and carefully tucked it into her back. The next morning brought a soft rain that painted the streets of the neighborhood in shades of gray and silver. Maya woke earlier than usual, excited to ride her newly repaired bicycle to school. She had dreamed about gear chains and socket wrenches, and she woke with her hands still tingling from the memory of holding real tools and making something work that had been broken. Carmen had left for work before dawn as usual, but this morning's note was different. Instead of just the standard reminders about breakfast and locking the door, she had written, "My beautiful Maya, I read about your adventure yesterday. I'm so proud of you for asking for help and for learning something new. We'll talk more tonight. Love, Mama." Maya tucked the note into her backpack alongside Eddie's business card, feeling like she was carrying treasures. She ate her breakfast of instant oatmeal and orange juice while watching the rain streak down the kitchen window, wondering if Eddie would be at his shop this early and whether he would remember her when she rode past. At Eddie's auto repair, the mechanic had been awake since 5 in the morning, thinking about the young girl who had asked for help with such simple honesty. He had called his eldest daughter, Maria, the night before to tell her about Maya, and the conversation had stirred up memories he hadn't visited in years. "Dad," Maria had said from her apartment 3 states away, "you always did have a soft spot for kids who reminded you of us. Remember when you taught that whole group of neighborhood kids how to change bike tires?" Eddie did remember. It had been almost 10 years ago, when his own children still lived at home, and the garage was always full of teenagers trying to fix their cars or motorcycles. Those had been some of the happiest years of his life, when teaching and fixing and problem-solving had filled every weekend and most evenings. After his kids had grown up and moved away, the shop had become quieter, more efficient, but somehow less alive. As Eddie organized his tools for the day, he found himself setting aside a small toolbox that had belonged to his son. It contained child-sized wrenches and screwdrivers, tools that had been gathering dust for years, but were still in perfect condition. Something told him he might need them again. The morning was busy with regular customers bringing in cars for routine maintenance, but Eddie found his attention drifting to the window every time he heard the sound of bicycle wheels on wet pavement. Around 8:30, he saw Maya riding past, her red bicycle gleaming despite the rain. She waved enthusiastically when she spotted him, and he waved back, feeling an unexpected warmth in his chest. Carmen Johnson spent her morning cleaning office buildings downtown, but her mind kept returning to Maya's detailed account of the previous day's adventure. She had read the note so many times that she had practically memorized it, and each reading brought new questions about this Eddie Martinez who had shown such kindness to her daughter. Carmen knew how difficult it was for Maya to ask for help. The child had learned early to be self-sufficient, partly out of necessity, and partly because Carmen had always tried to teach her to be strong and independent. But reading about Maya's experience at the auto shop, Carmen realized that maybe she had been so focused on teaching her daughter to be strong that she had forgotten to teach her that accepting help could also be a form of strength. During her lunch break, Carmen made a decision that surprised even her. Instead of eating her sandwich in the break room while checking her phone, she took the bus across town to Riverside Avenue. She wanted to see this auto shop for herself and thank the man who had taken time to help her daughter. Eddie was under the hood of a 1995 Honda Civic when he heard someone clear their throat behind him. He straightened up and turned around to see a woman about his own age, wearing the uniform of a commercial cleaning company and holding a small umbrella. Despite the tired lines around her eyes and the weariness that comes from working multiple jobs, she carried herself with dignity and purpose. "Excuse me," she said, extending her hand. "Are you Eddie Martinez? I'm Carmen Johnson, Maya's mother." Eddie wiped his hands on his coveralls before shaking hers, noting the calluses that spoke of hard work and the firm grip that suggested strength of character. "Ms. Johnson, Maya told me a little bit about you yesterday. She's a remarkable young lady." "She is," Carmen agreed, her voice warm with pride. "And According to the 3-page note she left me last night, you're pretty remarkable yourself. I wanted to come by and thank you for helping her with her bicycle and for taking the time to teach her instead of just fixing it for her. Eddie gestured toward 2 lawn chairs he kept outside the shop for customers who preferred to wait in the fresh air. Would you like to sit down for a few minutes? I'd love to hear more about Maya, if you have time. Carmen glanced at her watch, calculating how long she had before she needed to catch the bus back to her next job. I have about 20 minutes, she said, settling into one of the chairs. What followed was a conversation that neither of them had expected to have when they woke up that morning. Eddie told Carmen about his own 3 children and how much he had missed having young people around to teach and mentor. Carmen shared the challenges of raising Maya alone, working multiple jobs, and trying to be everything her daughter needed while often feeling like she was falling short. The hardest part, Carmen admitted, is knowing that there are things Maya needs that I just can't provide. I can't teach her to change a tire or fix a leaky faucet or throw a football. I do my best, but there are gaps, you know? Eddie nodded thoughtfully. I understand that feeling. After my wife died 5 years ago, I felt like there were gaps in my parenting too, things that she had always handled that I didn't know how to manage. But what I learned was that nobody can be everything to a child. What matters is that they have people in their lives who care about them and want to see them succeed. Carmen hadn't known about Eddie's loss, and she felt a new understanding of why he might have been drawn to help Maya. I'm sorry about your wife, she said softly. Thank you. Rosa was, well, she was the kind of person who would have loved Maya immediately. She always said that our job as adults wasn't just to take care of our own children, but to look out for all the children in our community. I think helping Maya yesterday was something Rosa would have expected me to do. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both thinking about the complexities of family and community and the ways that people could support each other across the boundaries of blood relation. Carmen found herself feeling hopeful in a way she hadn't experienced in years, not because her problems had been solved, but because she had found evidence that good people still existed in the world. Mr. Martinez, Carmen said finally, I want you to know that what you did yesterday meant more to Maya than just getting her bicycle fixed. She's been trying to handle everything by herself for so long, and I think she had started to believe that was just how life was supposed to be. Seeing that there are adults who will take time to help her and teach her, that changes something important about how she sees the world. Eddie felt a tightness in his throat that he hadn't experienced since his own children were young. Maya is welcome here anytime she needs help or wants to learn something new. And, Ms. Johnson, if you ever need anything yourself, please don't hesitate to ask. I know we've just met, but I believe in helping neighbors when I can. Carmen stood up, knowing she needed to catch her bus, but reluctant to end this conversation. I work 2 jobs, so my schedule is pretty crazy, but maybe Maya could stop by here sometimes after school? If she wouldn't be in the way, that is. I think she would love to learn more about how things work. She wouldn't be in the way at all, Eddie assured her. In fact, I think having her around might remind me why I became a mechanic in the first place. There's something about teaching a child that makes you remember the wonder of figuring out how things work. As Carmen walked away toward the bus stop, she felt lighter than she had in months. Not because her financial struggles had disappeared or because her work had become less demanding, but because she had found evidence that Maya was going to be okay. There were people in the world who would look out for her daughter, who would see her potential and help her develop it. For a single mother working multiple jobs just to stay afloat, that knowledge was worth more than gold. That afternoon, Maya rode her bicycle past Eddie's auto repair on her way home from school, but this time she stopped. She had been thinking about the conversation they had shared the previous morning, and she had questions about things Eddie had mentioned. More than that, though, she wanted to see if his offer of future help had been genuine or just something adults say to be polite. Eddie was inventory tools when he saw Maya wheel her bicycle into the bay of his shop. Hey there, Maya. How was school today? It was good, Maya replied, setting her backpack down carefully. We learned about simple machines in science class, and I kept thinking about the tools we used yesterday. My teacher was talking about levers and pulleys, and I realized that some of your wrenches work like levers, don't they? Eddie's face lit up with enthusiasm. That's exactly right. Come here, let me show you something. He selected several different wrenches from his toolbox, and laid them out on the workbench. What you learned in science class applies to almost everything we do in here. Want to see how? For the next hour, Eddie and Maya explored the connections between the scientific principles she was learning in school and the practical applications she had observed in the auto shop. Eddie showed her how different tools worked as levers, how hydraulic jacks used principles of fluid pressure, and how the gear systems in bicycles were really just applications of mechanical advantage. Maya was fascinated by the way that abstract concepts from her textbooks suddenly became concrete and useful when applied to real problems. She had always been a good student, but school had sometimes felt disconnected from real life. Now she was beginning to understand that everything she learned had practical applications, and that knowledge could be a tool for solving problems and building things. As they worked together, Eddie found himself remembering why he had originally been drawn to mechanical work. It wasn't just about fixing things that were broken. It was about understanding how things worked and using that understanding to make life better for people. Teaching Maya reminded him of the intellectual excitement he had felt as a young man learning his trade, when every new skill felt like a superpower and every solved problem felt like a victory. Maya, Eddie said as they cleaned up the tools they had been using, I have an idea. How would you feel about having a regular time to come here and learn about different things? Maybe a couple of afternoons a week after school? I could teach you about bicycles, cars, basic electrical work, whatever you're interested in learning. Maya's eyes grew wide with excitement. But then, a shadow of uncertainty crossed her face. Would that be okay with my mom? And would I be taking up too much of your time? Actually, Eddie said with a smile, I spoke with your mother this afternoon. She stopped by during her lunch break to thank me for helping you yesterday. And we talked about exactly this possibility. She thinks it would be wonderful for you to have a place to learn practical skills. Maya could hardly believe what she was hearing. Not only was Eddie willing to continue teaching her, but her mother had actually come here and approved of the arrangement. It felt too good to be true, like something that happened to other kids, but never to her. Really? She asked, needing confirmation that she had understood correctly. Really, Eddie assured her. Your mother is a remarkable woman, Maya, and she's raised a remarkable daughter. She wants you to have every opportunity to learn and grow, and I'm honored that she trusts me to be part of that. As Maya rode her bicycle home that afternoon, she felt like the world had suddenly expanded around her. Not only did she have a working bicycle again, but she had found a mentor who was excited to teach her and a mother who supported her learning new skills. For the first time in her young life, she felt like she was part of something larger than just her own small family. When Carmen arrived home from her second job that evening, she found Maya waiting for her with dinner already prepared and the table set for two. The sight of her daughter taking initiative to make their evening together special brought tears to Carmen's eyes, especially when she noticed that Maya had used the good plates they usually saved for holidays. Mama, Maya said as they sat down to eat. Mr. Eddie told me you came to see him today. Thank you for that. Carmen reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. Baby, there's something I want you to understand. What happened yesterday, with you asking for help and finding someone willing to teach you, that's not just a lucky accident. That's what happens when you're brave enough to reach out, and when you're smart enough to recognize good people when you meet them. Maya squeezed her mother's hand. Mr. Eddie said I can come to his shop a couple of times a week after school to learn about fixing things and how machines work. Is that really okay with you? It's more than okay, Carmen replied. Maya, I've been worried about all the things I can't teach you, all the ways I might be failing you because I have to work so much. But meeting Mr. Eddie today made me realize something important. I can't be everything you need, but I can make sure you have access to people who can teach you the things I don't know how to teach. They talked late into the evening, sharing stories about their days and making plans for the future. Maya told her mother about the connections between her science class and what she had learned at the auto shop, and Carmen shared her own memories of learning practical skills from her grandfather when she was young. As Maya got ready for bed that night, she looked out her bedroom window toward the direction of Eddie's auto repair, even though it was too far away to see. She thought about the tools waiting there, about the lessons she would learn, and about the kindness of a man who had seen potential in a 9-year-old girl with a broken bicycle. Down the street at the auto shop, Eddie was staying late to finish some paperwork, but his mind kept drifting to thoughts of curriculum and lesson plans. He found himself thinking about all the things he could teach Maya, not just about fixing machines, but about problem solving, persistence, and the satisfaction that comes from understanding how the world works. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found his son David's number. When David answered, Eddie could hear the sounds of his own grandchildren playing in the background. "Dad, how are you? It's kind of late for you to be calling." "I'm good, son. Really good, actually. I wanted to tell you about something that happened this week. I think I found myself a new student, and she reminds me a lot of you kids when you were young and curious about everything." Eddie spent the next 20 minutes telling David about Maya, about her courage in asking for help and her eagerness to learn. David listened with growing interest, remembering his own childhood afternoons in the auto shop and the pride he had felt when his father trusted him with real tools and real responsibilities. "Dad," David said when Eddie finished his story, "it sounds like you found something you didn't even know you were missing. When we were kids, you were always happiest when you were teaching us something new." 3 weeks into their new routine, Maya had become as much a fixture at Eddie's auto repair as the hydraulic lift and the air compressor. Every Tuesday and Thursday after school, she would wheel her bicycle into the bay and spend 2 hours learning skills that seemed to accumulate in her hands and mind like treasures. She had learned to change brake pads, check tire pressure, adjust bicycle seats to proper heights, and diagnose strange noises that customers described in creative and often inaccurate ways. Eddie had discovered that Maya possessed an unusual combination of manual dexterity and analytical thinking that made her a natural mechanic. She approached each problem methodically, asking questions that revealed a growing understanding of how mechanical systems work together. More importantly, she never seemed to tire of learning, treating each new skill as a puzzle to be solved rather than a chore to be completed. On this particular Thursday afternoon, Eddie had planned to teach Maya about electrical systems, starting with the simple wiring that powered bicycle lights. They had spread out an array of wires, batteries, and small bulbs on the workbench when Mrs. Henderson from down the street knocked hesitantly on the open bay door. "Excuse me, Eddie," she said, clutching the handlebars of an ancient 3-speed bicycle that looked like it hadn't been ridden in decades. "I heard from Carmen Johnson that you help people with bicycles. My granddaughter is coming to visit next week, and I thought maybe I could get this old thing working again." Eddie looked up from the electrical components he had been explaining to Maya. Mrs. Henderson was in her 70s, a retired school teacher who had lived in the neighborhood longer than almost anyone. Her bicycle had clearly been stored in a garage or basement for years, and even from across the shop, Eddie could see multiple problems that would need attention. "Of course, Mrs. Henderson. Let's take a look at what we're working with." Eddie walked over to examine the bicycle, with Maya following close behind, her curiosity sparked by the challenge of a new problem to solve. As they wheeled the bicycle into better light, the extent of the issues became apparent. The chain was rusty and stiff, the tires were flat and cracked, the brake cables were frayed, and the handlebars were loose enough to be dangerous. It would take several hours of work to restore the bicycle to safe riding condition. Maya studied the bicycle with the methodical approach Eddie had taught her, identifying each problem and considering the steps that would be needed to address them. "Mrs. Henderson," she said thoughtfully, "this bicycle has been sleeping for a long time, hasn't it?" Mrs. Henderson smiled at Maya's description. "Yes, dear, it has. It belonged to my daughter when she was about your age, and then it just sat in my garage collecting dust. I probably should have taken better care of it." "That's okay," Maya replied with the confidence of someone who had learned that most problems could be solved with the right approach and sufficient patience. "Mr. Eddie taught me that bicycles are very forgiving. Even when they've been ignored for a long time, they usually remember how to work once you clean them up and fix the broken parts." Eddie watched with pride as Maya began explaining to Mrs. Henderson what would need to be done to restore the bicycle. She spoke clearly and confidently, using the proper names for parts and describing the repair process in terms that were accurate but not intimidating. It occurred to Eddie that Maya had progressed from student to teacher in a remarkably short time. "Mrs. Henderson," Eddie said, "Maya and I would be happy to work on your bicycle. In fact, This might be a perfect project for Maya to take the lead on, with me helping when she needs it. Would you be comfortable with that arrangement? Mrs. Henderson looked at Maya with surprise and growing respect. You know how to fix bicycles, young lady? I'm still learning, Maya replied honestly. But I've fixed several bicycles already, and Mr. Eddie always checks my work to make sure it's safe. I think your bicycle just needs some attention and care to be ready for your granddaughter. What followed was a 3-hour master class in bicycle restoration, with Maya leading the work and Eddie providing guidance and quality control. Mrs. Henderson stayed to watch, fascinated by the systematic way Maya approached each problem and impressed by the depth of knowledge the child had acquired in such a short time. Maya began by completely disassembling the bicycle, cleaning each component carefully and assessing what could be repaired and what needed to be replaced. She explained each step to Mrs. Henderson as she worked, describing why certain parts failed over time and how regular maintenance could prevent most problems. Eddie found himself stepping back from the hands-on work, serving more as a supervisor and safety checker than as the primary mechanic. Maya had internalized not just the technical skills, but also the problem-solving approach that made good mechanics effective. She worked patiently and thoroughly, never rushing to the next step until she was satisfied with the current one. The transformation of Mrs. Henderson's bicycle was remarkable to witness. As Maya replaced the chain, installed new brake cables, patched and inflated the tires, and adjusted the seat and handlebars, the old bicycle began to look like something that belonged on the road rather than in a dusty garage. By the time Maya had finished her work and taken the bicycle for a test ride around the parking lot, it looked and functioned like a machine that was years younger than its actual age. Maya, Mrs. Henderson said as they watched the child ride smooth circles in front of the auto shop, that is absolutely amazing. I can't believe you brought that old bicycle back to life. It just needed someone to remember how to take care of it, Maya replied, bringing the bicycle to a stop in front of them. Bicycles are kind of like people that way. They work better when someone pays attention to them and fixes the problems before they get too big. Eddie felt a familiar tightness in his throat as he listened to Maya's explanation. She had learned far more than mechanical skills during her time at the shop. She had learned life lessons about care, attention, persistence, and the value of not giving up on things or people just because they needed some work. Mrs. Henderson insisted on paying for the bicycle repair, despite Maya's protest that she had enjoyed the work and didn't need payment. After some negotiation, they agreed that Mrs. Henderson would bake cookies for Maya and Eddie to share at the shop, and that she would tell her neighbors about the bicycle repair services available at Eddie's Auto Repair. As Mrs. Henderson rode her restored bicycle slowly down Riverside Avenue, testing the brakes and getting reacquainted with the feeling of riding, Maya felt a sense of accomplishment that was different from anything she had experienced in school or anywhere else. She had taken something that was broken and made it functional again. She had used her knowledge and skills to solve a real problem for someone who needed help. Most importantly, she had done work that mattered to someone other than herself. Eddie, Maya said as they cleaned up the tools they had used for the bicycle restoration, why does fixing things feel so much better than just learning about fixing things? Eddie considered the question seriously. I think it's because when you fix something, you're not just demonstrating knowledge. You're using that knowledge to make someone's life better. There's a big difference between knowing how to do something and actually doing it for someone who needs it. Like when I asked you to help me fix my bicycle? Maya asked. Exactly. You could have read about bicycle repair or watched videos about it. But until you actually needed the skills to solve a real problem, it was just information. When knowledge becomes useful for helping people, that's when it becomes meaningful. As they finished organizing the workspace, Maya found herself thinking about all the broken things she noticed in her daily life. Her apartment building had a squeaky front door that nobody ever fixed. The swing set at the elementary school had a chain that didn't work properly. Her neighbor across the hall had mentioned that her kitchen faucet dripped constantly. Maya realized that she was beginning to see the world differently, noticing mechanical problems that she might now have the skills to address. Eddie, she said thoughtfully, do you think other kids would want to learn how to fix things like I have? Eddie paused in his tool organizing, intrigued by the direction of Maya's thinking. I'm sure they would. Why do you ask? Well, Mrs. Henderson said she was going to tell her neighbors about bicycle repairs here. And I was thinking that maybe some of those neighbors have kids who would be interested in learning. I mean, I can't be the only kid in the neighborhood who doesn't have a father to teach them about tools and fixing things. Eddie felt that familiar expansion in his chest that happened when Maya said something that revealed her growing wisdom and empathy. She was already thinking beyond her own learning to consider how other children might benefit from similar opportunities. That's a wonderful idea, Maya. Would you be interested in helping me teach other kids, if some of them wanted to learn? Maya's face lit up with excitement. Could I really do that? I mean, I'm still learning myself. Some of the best teachers are people who are still learning, Eddie replied. You remember what it feels like to not understand something, so you're good at explaining things in ways that make sense to beginners. Plus, kids your age might be more comfortable learning from someone who's closer to their age than from an old guy like me. The idea of teaching other children excited Maya in a way that surprised her. She had always thought of herself as someone who needed to learn from others, not someone who might have knowledge worth sharing. But, as she considered the skills she had acquired over the past few weeks, she realized that she did know things that could be useful to other kids her age. That evening, Maya couldn't wait to tell her mother about the idea of expanding Eddie's informal teaching to include other children from the neighborhood. Carmen listened with growing interest as Maya described her work on Mrs. Henderson's bicycle and her thoughts about teaching other kids practical skills. Maya, Carmen said when her daughter finished explaining her idea. Do you realize what you're talking about? You're talking about creating something like a community program where kids can learn skills they might not get anywhere else. Is that a good thing? Maya asked, suddenly, uncertain whether her idea was as good as it had seemed at the auto shop. It's a wonderful thing, baby. It's the kind of thing that can make a real difference in kids' lives. But it's also a big responsibility. If you and Mr. Eddie start teaching other children, you'll need to be patient when they don't learn as quickly as you did. You'll need to be encouraging when they get frustrated. You'll need to be a good example of how to work safely and carefully. Maya considered her mother's words seriously. She had experienced firsthand how much difference it made to have an adult who believed in her ability to learn and grow. The idea that she might be able to provide that same support to other children felt both exciting and intimidating. I think I want to try it, Maya said finally. Even if I'm not perfect at teaching, I think I could help other kids feel like someone believes they can learn to fix things. Carmen felt a rush of pride that had nothing to do with her daughter's mechanical skills and everything to do with her character. Maya was developing into someone who thought about helping others, who saw opportunities to share what she had learned, and who was willing to take on responsibility for supporting other children's growth. The next morning, Carmen made another unexpected decision. She called in sick to her first job, something she almost never did, and instead walked to Eddie's auto repair during what would normally be Maya's school hours. She wanted to discuss Maya's idea with Eddie and explore whether it might be possible to create something more formal and sustainable. Eddie was surprised to see Carmen arrive during morning hours, and his first concern was that something might be wrong with Maya. Carmen quickly reassured him that Maya was fine and at school, then explained that she wanted to talk about the teaching idea Maya had proposed. Eddie, Carmen began, settling into one of the lawn chairs outside the shop. I've been thinking about Maya's idea all night, and I think it might be more important than either of us realized at first. There are a lot of kids in this neighborhood who could benefit from the kind of mentoring and skill building that Maya has experienced here. Eddie nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about it too. Maya has such a natural teaching instinct, and she's right that there are probably other children who would love to learn these kinds of practical skills. The question is how to do it in a way that's safe and manageable. Carmen had clearly given the matter considerable thought. What if we started small? Maybe Saturday mornings, with just a few kids to begin with. Maya could help you teach basic bicycle maintenance and simple tool use. If it goes well, we could think about expanding from there. I like that approach, Eddie replied. Start with something manageable and see how it develops. But, Carmen, I want to make sure you understand that if we do this, Maya would be taking on a leadership role that might change how other kids in the neighborhood see her. She'd be known as the girl who teaches bicycle repair, which is wonderful, but it also comes with expectations. Carmen appreciated Eddie's thoughtfulness about the broader implications of Maya's growing expertise. Maya understands that helping others means taking responsibility seriously. I think she's ready for that. But we should definitely start slowly and make sure she's comfortable with each step. They spent the next hour discussing practical details, how many children they might start with, what safety protocols would be necessary, how to structure the learning so that everyone felt successful, and what materials they would need. Eddie found himself energized by the planning process, remembering how much he had enjoyed the years when his garage was regularly full of young people learning and creating. As Carmen prepared to leave for her second job, Eddie made a suggestion that surprised them both. "Carmen, what would you think about joining us for these Saturday sessions? Not necessarily as a teacher, but as another adult presence, and maybe as someone who could help with the organizational aspects." Carmen had not expected this invitation, and it took her a moment to process what Eddie was suggesting. "You want me to be part of teaching the kids? I think having multiple adults involved would make the program stronger and safer. Plus, you might enjoy learning some of these skills yourself. Maya tells me you're pretty handy around your apartment when things need fixing." Carmen felt something shift inside her as she considered this possibility. For years, she had been focused entirely on earning money to support Maya, working jobs that paid the bills but didn't feed her soul. The idea of spending Saturday mornings teaching children practical skills, working alongside Maya and Eddie to create something meaningful for the community, stirred feelings she had almost forgotten she had. "I'd love to be part of it," she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. "I may not know much about bicycle repair, but I could learn alongside the kids. Sometimes it helps children to see adults learning too." As Eddie watched Carmen walk toward the bus stop, he realized that Maya's simple question about whether other kids might want to learn had set in motion something much larger than any of them had initially imagined. What had started as one child needing help with a broken bicycle was evolving into a community program that could impact dozens of young people over the coming years. That afternoon, when Maya arrived at the auto shop for her regular Thursday session, Eddie told her about his conversation with her mother and their plans for starting Saturday morning sessions with other children from the neighborhood. Maya listened with growing excitement, asking detailed questions about how the teaching would be structured and what her role would be. "Maya," Eddie said as they prepared to begin work on the electrical system lesson they had been interrupted from earlier in the week, "I want you to understand that what we're planning will be different from our regular sessions. When you're helping teach other kids, you'll need to be patient if they don't pick things up as quickly as you did. Some of them might be frustrated or nervous around tools. Others might not listen as carefully as they should. That's okay," Maya replied with confidence that impressed Eddie. "When I first started coming here, I was nervous too. I think if I remember what that felt like, I can help other kids feel more comfortable." "That's exactly the right attitude," Eddie said. "Good teachers remember what it was like to be beginners." As they worked together on wiring bicycle lights, Eddie found himself watching Maya with new eyes. She was no longer just a student learning to fix bicycles. She was becoming a young teacher who would help other children discover their own capabilities. The transformation was remarkable to witness, and Eddie felt privileged to have played a role in nurturing it. Maya tested the lights they had wired. Watching them illuminate the first Saturday morning of the neighborhood bicycle workshop dawned clear and crisp, with autumn leaves crunching underfoot as Eddie arrived at his shop early to set up workstations for 6 children. Word had spread quickly through the community about the free bicycle repair and maintenance lessons, and Eddie had been surprised by the number of parents who had called to ask if their children could participate. Maya arrived 30 minutes before the scheduled start time, carrying a notebook where she had written down teaching points and safety reminders that she had been thinking about all week. She had spent considerable time planning how to explain concepts that now seemed natural to her, remembering her own confusion during those first lessons with Eddie and trying to anticipate where other children might struggle. Carmen came with Maya, having arranged to trade shifts with a coworker so she could participate in this first session. She carried a box of cookies that Mrs. Henderson had baked as promised, along with small water bottles and a first aid kit that she had assembled specifically for the workshop. Though nervous about her lack of mechanical knowledge, Carmen was excited to be part of something that brought together learning, community, and her daughter's growing expertise. Eddie had organized 6 complete bicycle repair stations, each equipped with basic tools sized for small hands. He had spent hours the previous evening cleaning and organizing older tools from his collection, setting aside anything that might be unsafe for children to use unsupervised. The workspace had been transformed from a professional auto repair shop into something that looked more like a classroom, with instructional posters showing bicycle parts and safety procedures taped to the walls. The first students arrived promptly at 9 o'clock, 10-year-old Marcus Williams and his 8-year-old sister Keisha, both carrying bicycles that had clearly seen better days. Marcus's bike had a flat tire and a chain that hung loosely, while Keisha's had wobbly wheels and brakes that squeaked loudly enough to be heard from blocks away. Their mother, Mrs. Williams, lingered in the doorway looking grateful and slightly overwhelmed. "Are you sure this is okay?" Mrs. Williams asked Carmen. "I mean, these are real tools, and Marcus can be a little energetic sometimes." Carmen understood the mother's concern, remembering her own nervousness the first time Maya had described learning to use serious repair tools. "Maya started exactly where your kids are starting," she assured Mrs. Williams. "Eddie is wonderful with children, and safety is always the first priority." Within the next few minutes, 4 more children arrived with their families. Twins named Alex and Jordan, whose grandmother had heard about the program from Mrs. Henderson, a shy 11-year-old named David, whose father worked construction and thought mechanical skills would be valuable for his son to learn, and 9-year-old Sophia, whose bicycle was in perfect condition, but who simply wanted to understand how it worked. Eddie gathered the children in a circle and began with introductions and a discussion of workshop rules. Maya found herself naturally helping, moving among the children to make sure they could all see the tools Eddie was displaying and answering questions about what different wrenches were used for. Her confidence and knowledge impressed the other children, several of whom asked how she had learned so much about bicycle repair. "I started exactly like you," Maya told them honestly. "My bicycle was broken, and I didn't know how to fix it, so I asked Mr. Eddie for help. The difference is that I've been coming here for a few weeks, so I've had more time to practice. By the end of today, you'll know how to do things that I didn't know a month ago." The morning's lesson focused on basic bicycle safety and maintenance, checking tire pressure, testing brakes, adjusting seat height, and cleaning chains. Eddie demonstrated each procedure first, then had Maya show the children how she approached the same task, and finally, let each child practice with supervision and guidance. What surprised everyone, including Eddie, was how naturally Maya had developed as a teacher. She remembered being confused by technical terms and automatically translated Eddie's explanations into simpler language. When Marcus struggled to understand why tire pressure mattered, Maya had him sit on his bicycle and feel the difference between riding with properly inflated tires and riding with soft ones. When Keisha was intimidated by the size of the wrenches, Maya showed her how to hold tools properly and reminded her that she had felt the same way during her first lesson. Carmen watched her daughter with amazement and pride. Maya had developed not just technical skills, but teaching instincts that seemed to come from deep empathy and genuine care for the other children's success. She moved between workstations offering encouragement, catching mistakes before they became problems, and celebrating each small victory with enthusiasm that was clearly genuine. The challenge came when David became frustrated with the adjustment mechanism on his bicycle seat. Despite repeated explanations and demonstrations, he couldn't get the seat to stay at the proper height, and his frustration was building toward what looked like it might become an angry outburst. Maya noticed David's mounting frustration before Eddie did, and she approached the situation with wisdom that surprised all the adults present. Instead of immediately jumping in to solve the problem for him, she sat down beside his bicycle and asked quietly, "David, can you tell me what's happening with the seat that's making you frustrated?" David explained that every time he thought he had the seat adjusted correctly, it would slip down again when he put weight on it. Maya listened carefully, then asked if she could look at the adjustment mechanism. She quickly identified that the clamp wasn't engaging properly because the seat post was slightly bent, creating an alignment problem that made proper tightening impossible. "David," Maya said thoughtfully, "this isn't a problem you're having because you don't know how to adjust bicycle seats. This is a problem with the bicycle itself. The seat post is bent just a little bit, which makes it really hard to get a good connection with the clamp. Want to see what I mean?" Maya showed David the slight bend in the seat post and explained how it prevented the clamp from gripping properly. Then, she asked Eddie if they could demonstrate how to straighten a bent seat post, turning David's frustrating problem into a learning opportunity for everyone. Eddie was impressed by Maya's diagnostic skills and her instinct to turn a problem into a teaching moment. With David as his primary assistant, he demonstrated how to carefully straighten a bent seat post using proper tools and techniques. David's frustration disappeared as he realized that his difficulty hadn't been due to any lack of skill on his part, and he became actively engaged in solving the more complex problem. The successful resolution of David's seat post problem seemed to energize the entire group. The children had seen that mechanical problems sometimes had unexpected causes, that frustration was a normal part of learning, and that complicated issues could be solved with patience and the right approach. More importantly, they had witnessed Maya identifying and solving a problem that the adults had initially missed, which elevated her credibility as someone they could learn from. As the morning progressed, the children tackled increasingly complex tasks. Keisha successfully adjusted her bicycle brakes so they no longer squeaked. Marcus not only fixed his flat tire, but learned to patch the inner tube so he could repair future punctures himself. The twins worked together to clean and oil their bicycle chains, arguing good-naturedly about the proper amount of lubricant to apply. Sophia, whose bicycle hadn't needed any repairs, became fascinated with understanding how gear systems worked. Maya spent considerable time explaining how different gear combinations provided mechanical advantage for climbing hills or riding fast on flat ground. By the end of the morning, Sophia was talking about wanting to learn more about mechanical engineering and asking whether she could come back next week even if her bicycle didn't need repairs. Eddie found himself stepping back from direct instruction more and more as the morning continued, serving primarily as a safety supervisor while Maya took the lead in teaching and problem-solving. Carmen helped with organization and encouragement, discovering that she enjoyed the teaching environment and was learning alongside the children. As the workshop was winding down, Mrs. Williams approached Carmen with an expression of amazement. "I cannot believe what I just watched," she said. "Marcus has never sat still for 3 hours in his entire life, and he just spent the whole morning focused and learning. How did you all make that happen?" Carmen looked across the shop at Maya, who was helping the twins properly store the tools they had used. "I think it's because the children are learning something that feels immediately useful and important. Maya always says that fixing things feels different from just learning about things because you can see right away that your knowledge has real value." The success of the first workshop exceeded everyone's expectations. All 6 children left with bicycles that worked better than when they had arrived, and, more importantly, they left with knowledge and confidence that would serve them for years to come. Several parents immediately asked about signing up for future workshops, and Mrs. Henderson mentioned that she had already told several neighbors about the program. As they cleaned up the workspace after the families had left, Eddie, Maya, and Carmen reflected on what they had accomplished together. The morning had demonstrated that Maya's growth from student to teacher was not just possible, but natural, and that the community hunger for this kind of practical education was deeper than any of them had realized. "Maya," Eddie said as they organized tools back into their proper places, "you were remarkable today. You have genuine teaching instincts, and the other kids responded to you in ways that they might not respond to an adult. You made learning feel accessible and fun." Maya felt proud, but also thoughtful about the responsibility she had taken on. "It felt really good to help them understand things that confused me when I was starting. But, Eddie, I realized today that there's still so much I don't know. When David's seat post was bent, I almost missed it too. What if next week someone has a problem I can't figure out?" "That's what makes you a good teacher," Carmen said, joining their conversation. "Good teachers know that learning never stops, and they're honest about what they don't know. The best thing you can do when you encounter a problem you can't solve is to admit that and ask for help, just like you did the very first day you came here." Eddie nodded in agreement. "Maya, one of the most important things I've learned in 30 years of fixing things is that the wisest mechanics are the ones who know when to ask questions and when to seek help from someone with more experience. That's not a weakness. It's exactly how you continue learning and improving." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the open bay door. They turned to see a man in his 40s wearing a suit and carrying a briefcase, looking somewhat out of place in the automotive environment. "Excuse me," the man said, consulting a small notebook. "I'm looking for Eddie Martinez. I'm Tom Chin from the Parks and Recreation Department. I heard about the bicycle workshop you held here this morning, and I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions." Eddie felt a moment of concern, wondering if there were regulations he should have been aware of or permits he should have obtained. "Of course," he replied. "What can I help you with?" Tom Chin's expression was friendly rather than official. "Actually, I'm here because we've been getting calls from parents asking if the city offers programs like what you did here today. Apparently, word is spreading quickly about children learning bicycle maintenance and repair. The Parks and Recreation Department is always looking for community partners who can provide educational programming that serves families." Maya listened with growing excitement as Tom Chun explained that the city was interested in exploring ways to support community-based educational programs, particularly those that taught practical skills and served neighborhoods that might not have access to similar opportunities elsewhere. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Eddie asked, intrigued but cautious. "Well, we have workshop space available at the community center, and we have a small budget for materials and instructor support. If you were interested in expanding your program, we might be able to provide resources that would allow you to serve more children and offer workshops more frequently." Carmen felt her heart rate increase as she considered the implications of what Tom Chun was describing. What had started as Maya asking for help with a broken bicycle was evolving into something that could impact hundreds of children in their community. Maya stepped forward with the confidence she had been developing over the past few weeks. "Mr. Chun," she said, "would this partnership mean that more kids could learn to fix bicycles, or would it change what we teach and how we teach it?" Tom Chun looked impressed by Maya's directness and the sophistication of her question. "That would be entirely up to you and Mr. Martinez. Our role would be to provide space and materials, but the curriculum and teaching approach would remain your decision. We believe in supporting successful programs rather than trying to change them." Eddie found himself considering possibilities he had never imagined. The morning's workshop had been deeply satisfying, reminding him why he had originally been drawn to mechanical work and teaching. The idea of reaching more children and having resources to expand the program was appealing, but he also valued the intimate, community-based nature of what they had created. "Tom," Eddie said thoughtfully, "could we start with a trial partnership? Maybe one Saturday morning a month at the community center, while continuing our regular workshops here. That would let us see how the expanded format works before making any major changes." "That sounds perfect," Tom Chin replied. "And honestly, that gradual approach is exactly what we were hoping you'd suggest. The most successful community partnerships are the ones that grow organically rather than being forced into a particular model." As Tom Chin left with plans to follow up during the week, Maya, Carmen, and Eddie sat in the lawn chairs outside the auto shop and tried to process what had just happened. What had begun as a simple request for bicycle repair had grown into a community program that might soon be operating with city support and reaching dozens of children each month. "Mama," Maya said quietly, "do you think we're ready for something this big?" Carmen looked at her daughter, remembering the shy, self-reliant child who had pushed her broken bicycle past this auto shop just a few weeks earlier. That child had been replaced by a confident young person who could diagnose mechanical problems, teach other children, and ask thoughtful questions about community programming. "Baby," Carmen replied, "I think you've been ready for bigger challenges than any of us realized. But the beautiful thing is that you don't have to figure everything out by yourself. You have Eddie, and you have me, and now you have a whole community of people who believe in what you're doing." 6 months later, Maya stood in front of 23 children at the Lincoln Elementary Community Center, explaining the proper technique for adjusting bicycle brake cables to a group that included kids from 3 different schools and ages ranging from 7 to 14. Her hands moved confidently as she demonstrated each step, and her voice carried the authority of someone who had taught these skills dozens of times while never losing patience with beginners. The partnership with the Parks and Recreation Department had exceeded everyone's expectations. What had started as one Saturday morning workshop at Eddie's Auto Repair had grown into a comprehensive program that met twice weekly at the community center and still held special advanced sessions at the auto shop for students who wanted to learn more complex repairs. Maya had become the program's lead youth instructor, working alongside Eddie and a rotating group of volunteer adult assistants that now included her mother, two retired teachers, and a mechanical engineer who had heard about the program from her daughter. Carmen Johnson had undergone her own transformation during these months. She had discovered that she enjoyed teaching and had a natural talent for organizing educational programs. When the Parks and Recreation Department offered her a part-time position coordinating community education initiatives, she had been able to reduce her hours at the cleaning service and focus on work that felt meaningful and sustainable. For the first time in years, Carmen felt like her life was moving towards something positive rather than just struggling to stay afloat. Eddie Martinez had found renewed purpose in his work that extended far beyond fixing cars and earning money. His auto shop had become an informal community center where children stopped by to ask questions, parents brought minor repair problems, and neighbors felt welcome to seek advice about maintaining their homes and vehicles. The teaching program had reminded him that his knowledge and skills were valuable in ways that transcended their commercial applications, and he had begun to see himself as a community resource rather than just a business owner. The day's workshop was special because it marked the graduation of the program's first class of regular students, including Marcus and Keisha Williams, the twins Alex and Jordan, David, and Sophia, all of whom had been attending sessions for the full 6 months. These children had progressed from basic bicycle maintenance to complex repairs, and several had begun bringing neighbors' bicycles to the workshops to fix under supervision. Maya had planned a ceremony that would demonstrate how much each child had learned and celebrate their growth from beginners to competent bicycle mechanics. Each graduate would receive a basic toolkit that had been donated by local hardware stores and would demonstrate their skills by completely servicing a donated bicycle that would then be given to a child in the community who needed transportation. Today is special not just because you're graduating, Maya told the assembled children, but because you're going to use what you've learned to help other kids in our neighborhood. Each bicycle you work on today will go to someone who needs a way to get to school, to work, or to visit friends and family. Marcus Williams, now 11 and considerably more focused than he had been during that first workshop, raised his hand. Maya, how did you know that this program would work? I mean, when you first started learning from Mr. Eddie, did you think it would become something this big? Maya considered the question seriously, remembering her own nervousness during those first visits to the auto shop. Marcus, I honestly didn't think beyond getting my bicycle fixed and maybe learning enough to take care of it myself. But I think the reason the program works is because we started with real problems that needed solving, and we discovered that fixing things together is more fun and more meaningful than any of us expected. As the children began working on their graduation projects, Maya moved between workstations offering guidance and encouragement. She had learned to recognize when a child needed direct instruction versus when they needed to work through a problem independently, and she had developed the ability to ask questions that led students to discover solutions rather than simply providing answers. Keisha Williams was struggling with a derailleur adjustment that required precise cable tension, and Maya could see frustration building in the 8-year-old's face. Instead of taking over the repair, Maya sat down beside Keisha and asked her to explain what she thought the problem might be. The chain keeps jumping to the wrong gear, Keisha said, her voice tight with concentration. I adjusted the cable like you showed us, but it's still not working right. Maya examined Keisha's work and noticed that the cable tension was actually correct, but the derailleur hanger had been slightly bent, probably when the bicycle had been dropped or had fallen over. Instead of immediately pointing out the problem, Maya asked Keisha to show her how she had diagnosed the shifting issue. As Keisha walked through her diagnostic process, Maya guided her toward noticing the bent hanger by asking questions about what could cause shifting problems beyond cable tension. When Keisha spotted the bent component and realized what was causing the malfunction, her face lit up with understanding and pride. So the cable adjustment was right, Keisha said. But there was a different problem that I needed to find first. Exactly, Maya replied. And now that you know how to spot a bent derailleur hanger, you'll be able to diagnose this problem if you see it again. That's the difference between just following instructions and really understanding how bicycles work. Across the workshop, David was helping 7-year-old Emily, a new student who had been nervous about using tools. David had remembered his own initial intimidation and had taken on the role of peer mentor with natural empathy and patience. Maya watched him explain brake adjustment techniques with the same careful attention to Emily's comfort level that Eddie had shown to Maya during those first lessons. Eddie moved through the workshop serving as the ultimate supervisor and quality control checker, but increasingly he found himself in the background as Maya, and the more experienced students took responsibility for teaching and problem-solving. He felt a deep satisfaction watching Maya guide other children through challenges that would have seemed impossible to her just months earlier. Carmen Johnson was documenting the graduation ceremony with photos and notes that would become part of the program's permanent record and would be used to apply for grant funding that could expand the initiative to other community centers. She had become skilled at writing program descriptions and educational objectives, and she had discovered that her years of managing household logistics on limited resources had prepared her well for coordinating community programs on tight budgets. As the morning progressed, each graduate successfully completed their bicycle restoration project. The donated bicycles, which had arrived in various states of disrepair, were transformed into reliable transportation that looked almost new and functioned perfectly. More importantly, the children had demonstrated mastery of skills that would serve them for life and had experienced the satisfaction of using their knowledge to help others. Sophia, now 10 years old and still fascinated by mechanical engineering, had become particularly skilled at diagnosing complex problems and had helped several younger children understand gear systems and brake mechanics. She had begun talking about wanting to study engineering in college, and her parents had started looking into science and technology programs that might nurture her interests. As the ceremony was concluding, Tom Chin from the Parks and Recreation Department arrived to present certificates to the graduating students and to make an announcement that surprised everyone present. The bicycle repair program had attracted attention from the State Education Department, which was looking for successful models of community-based practical education that could be replicated in other cities. We've been asked to present your program at the State Conference on Innovative Education next month, Tom told Eddie, Maya, and Carmen. They want to understand how you've created something that engages children, teaches valuable skills, and brings communities together. Maya felt a familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness at the idea of presenting their work to educators from across the state. Mr. Chun, would we be talking about how the program works, or would we be demonstrating bicycle repair? Both, Tom replied. They want to see the program in action and hear from all of you about what makes it successful. Maya, they're particularly interested in hearing from you about the youth leadership component and how you developed your teaching skills. Eddie watched Maya process this information, seeing the same analytical approach she applied to mechanical problems. She was considering not just the opportunity, but the responsibility that came with representing their program to a broader audience. I think we should do it, Maya said finally. If our program can help kids in other places learn these skills and feel the same confidence we've helped children here develop, then it's important to share what we've learned. Carmen felt a surge of pride listening to her daughter speak with such maturity and community-mindedness. The child who had once been reluctant to ask for help was now thinking about how to help other communities create similar opportunities for their children. As the families were leaving that afternoon, Mrs. Henderson arrived with fresh cookies and news that the bicycle program had inspired other community initiatives. A group of retired teachers was organizing weekend tutoring sessions, and several local business owners were exploring ways to offer apprenticeship opportunities to teenagers interested in learning trades. Maya, Mrs. Henderson said, offering her a cookie still warm from the oven. Do you realize that what you started has become a model for how communities can support their young people? You asked for help with one bicycle, and that courage has created opportunities for dozens of children. Maya accepted the cookie gratefully, but looked thoughtful about Mrs. Henderson's observation. I think what really happened is that lots of people were ready to help and teach, but nobody knew how to start. My broken bicycle just gave everyone a reason to come together. Eddie smiled at Maya's characteristically thoughtful analysis. She had developed the ability to see situations clearly and to understand the complex interactions that created successful outcomes. It was a skill that would serve her well not just in mechanical work, but in any field she chose to pursue. As the sun began to set on this graduation day, Maya, Carmen, and Eddie sat in the familiar lawn chairs outside the auto shop, reflecting on how much their lives had changed since that morning when a 9-year-old girl had asked for help with her broken bicycle. The program they had built together was thriving and expanding, but more importantly, they had created relationships and discovered capabilities that had transformed all three of them. Maya had grown from a self-reliant child trying to solve problems alone into a confident young person who understood that asking for help and offering help were both essential parts of community life. She had learned skills that would always be useful, but more importantly, she had learned that knowledge became meaningful when it was shared with others who needed it. Carmen had transitioned from working multiple jobs just to survive into building a career that felt purposeful and sustainable. She had discovered that her organizational skills and empathy were valuable in ways she had never recognized, and she had found meaningful work that allowed her to support her daughter's growth while pursuing her own development. Eddie had rediscovered the joy and purpose that had originally drawn him to mechanical work. Teaching Maya and the other children had reminded him that his knowledge and skills were valuable not just commercially but as tools for nurturing young minds and building community connections. His auto shop had evolved into something more than a business. It had become a place where people felt welcome to learn and grow. The bicycle repair program was planning to expand to 3 more community centers over the following year, with Maya serving as a youth coordinator who would help train other young people to become peer instructors. Carmen would be taking on additional responsibilities with the Parks and Recreation Department, developing curriculum and training materials that could be used by similar programs in other cities. Eddie was looking forward to the challenges of scaling the program while maintaining the intimate, community-based approach that had made it successful. He had begun planning advanced workshops that would teach small engine repair, basic electrical work, and home maintenance skills, always with the goal of empowering young people to understand and improve the world around them. As Maya prepared to ride her bicycle home that evening, she paused to look at the red bike that had started everything. It was no longer just transportation. It had become a symbol of what was possible when people were willing to take the risk of asking for help and when communities came together to support each other's growth. The chain that had broken on her way home from school 9 months earlier had been replaced several times as Maya had learned proper maintenance techniques. The paint was brighter, the components functioned better, and the bicycle was more reliable than it had ever been. But the most important changes were not mechanical. They were in the relationships and opportunities that had grown from one simple, honest request for help. Maya rode through the neighborhood that had become her extended community, passing houses where she had helped children repair their bicycles, waving to Mrs. Henderson working in her garden, and thinking about the young people who would learn these same skills in the months and years to come. She had learned that broken things could be fixed, that complex problems could be solved with patience and the right approach, and that the courage to ask for help could create opportunities that none of them could have imagined. But, perhaps most importantly, Maya had discovered that sometimes the best way to find a father figure, a mentor, and a sense of belonging was not to search for them directly, but to focus on growing into the kind of person who could recognize and appreciate such gifts when they appeared, often in the most ordinary and unexpected moments. As she turned into her apartment complex, Maya was already thinking about the next workshop and the new students who would join their community of learners and teachers. She was looking forward to helping them discover, as she had learned, that asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but an act of courage that could lead to transformation not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. The story that had begun with a broken bicycle chain had evolved into something much larger, a reminder that communities are built one relationship at a time, that knowledge becomes wisdom when it is shared, and that the simple act of believing in a child's potential can create ripple effects that extend far beyond anything that could be measured or predicted. In her apartment that night, Maya wrote in her journal about the graduation ceremony and her thoughts about representing their program at the state education conference. Her handwriting was more confident than it had been months earlier, and her thoughts were more complex and forward-looking. Carmen read over her daughter's shoulder, amazed as always by Maya's maturity and insight. "What are you most proud of about today?" she asked. Maya considered the question carefully, as she had learned to do when presented with problems, mechanical or otherwise. "I'm proud that all the kids felt successful and confident about what they had learned. But I think I'm most proud that they want to help other kids learn these same skills. When you help someone discover they can fix things and solve problems, they want to share that feeling with others." Carmen hugged her daughter tightly, thinking about how much they had both grown and changed since that morning when Maya had asked a stranger for help with her broken bicycle. The courage of that simple request had created a new life for both of them, full of purpose, community, and endless possibilities for growth and learning. As Maya fell asleep that night, she thought about Eddie's auto shop, about the children who would attend next week's workshop, and about the communities across the state that might soon have their own bicycle repair programs. She drifted off to sleep with grease still faintly visible under her fingernails and her head full of plans for teaching, learning, and helping others discover the satisfaction that came from understanding how the world worked and how broken things could always be made whole again. Eddie watched Maya absorb her mother's words, seeing in her expression the same mixture of excitement and determination that had characterized her approach to learning bicycle repair. She was growing into someone who understood that accepting challenges and accepting help were not contradictory, but complementary approaches to building a meaningful life. As the afternoon sun slanted through the open bay doors of the auto shop, the three of them sat together making plans for workshops and thinking about the children who would benefit from learning that broken things could be fixed, that complex problems could be solved with patience and the right tools, and that the courage to ask for help could lead to opportunities none of them could have imagined. Maya's bicycle, the one that had brought her to this place, stood nearby, its red paint gleaming and its chain running smoothly. It was no longer just a mode of transportation. It had become a symbol of what was possible when people were willing to invest in each other's growth, and when communities came together to support the development of young minds and capable hands. Innate brightly when connected to the battery. "Eddie," she said, admiring their work, "when we start teaching other kids, do you think we should begin with something like this? Something where they can see the results right away?" "That's an excellent thought," Eddie replied. "Immediate feedback is really important when you're learning. When kids can see that they've successfully made something work, it builds their confidence for tackling harder problems." As Maya prepared to ride home that evening, she felt excited about the future in a way that was entirely new to her. Not only was she continuing to learn skills that fascinated her, but she was going to have the opportunity to help other children discover the same sense of capability and accomplishment that had transformed her own life over the past few weeks. The broken bicycle that had brought her to Eddie's auto repair had been fixed long ago, but the relationship and opportunities that had grown from that first request for help continued to expand in directions none of them could have predicted. Maya was learning that some problems, when approached with courage and openness, had solutions that were far bigger and more wonderful than anyone could have imagined. After they hung up, Eddie sat in the quiet auto shop for a few more minutes, surrounded by the tools and equipment that had been his livelihood for decades. But tonight, they looked different somehow. Instead of just the means to make a living, they looked like instruments of possibility, ways to pass on knowledge and skills to someone who was hungry to learn. Maya fell asleep that night with her hand resting on the business card Eddie had given her, thinking about all the questions she wanted to ask and all the things she wanted to learn. For the first time in her life, the future felt bright and full of potential, not because her circumstances had changed dramatically, but because she had discovered that there were people willing to invest in her growth and development. Carmen stayed awake a little longer, thinking about the conversation she had shared with Eddie earlier that day. She realized that she had been so focused on trying to be both mother and father to Maya that she had forgotten the possibility that other people might want to help. Meeting Eddie had reminded her that community support didn't diminish her role as Maya's mother, It enriched Maya's life in ways that made Carmen's parenting more effective and more fulfilling. As the neighborhood settled into sleep, 3 lives had been quietly transformed by a simple question and an honest answer. Maya had discovered that asking for help could lead to opportunities she had never imagined. Eddie had rediscovered the joy of mentoring young people and passing on his knowledge. And Carmen had learned that accepting help from others didn't make her a weaker parent. It made her a wiser one. The stage was set for a relationship that would change all 3 of them in ways they couldn't yet imagine, built on the foundation of a broken bicycle chain and the courage to ask for help when it was needed most. Pack. Thank you, Mr. Eddie. This was the best morning I've had in a really long time. As she rode away toward school, Eddie stood in the doorway of his shop and watched until she disappeared around the corner. He had started the morning thinking he would spend his time replacing brake pads and changing oil, but instead he had been reminded of one of life's most important truths. Sometimes the most meaningful work has nothing to do with the job you thought you were hired to do. That evening, when Carmen Johnson came home from her first job, tired and worried about the overtime she would need to work that weekend, she found a note from Maya that was different from all the others. Instead of the usual report about homework completed and dinner eaten, Maya had written 3 full pages describing her morning at Eddie's auto repair. She wrote about learning to fix her bicycle, about the kindness of a stranger, and about feeling, for the first time she could remember, like someone believed she was capable of much more than she had ever imagined. Carmen read the note twice, tears streaming down her face as she realized that her daughter had found something she had never been able to provide, a father figure who was willing to invest time and patience in helping Maya see her own potential. She made a mental note to stop by Eddie's auto repair the next day to thank the man who had taken time out of his busy schedule to show kindness to a child who needed it. Meanwhile, Eddie told his wife about his morning as they sat down to dinner together. There was something special about that little girl, he said. She reminded me of our kids when they were young, so eager to learn and understand how things work. I think I might have found myself a new apprentice. His wife smiled, recognizing the tone in her husband's voice that always appeared when he was planning to go above and beyond for someone who needed help. You know, she said, we still have all those old tools in the garage from when the kids were learning. Maybe it's time to put them to good use again. As Maya fell asleep that night, her bicycle parked safely next to her bed where she could see it, she thought about everything she had learned that day. But more than the mechanical knowledge, more than the problem-solving skills, she had learned something profound about the power of asking for help and about the unexpected kindness that could emerge from the most ordinary moments. She had also learned that fathers didn't have to be biological to be real, and that family could be found in the most surprising places. As she drifted off to sleep, Maya was already looking forward to the next time she would need to learn something new, because now she knew that somewhere in the world, there was someone who believed in her ability to figure things out.